Hello guys, my name is Zvonimir and yeah, very happy to be here at the Major and Design Africa and to be talking to all of you about Star Trek, right? I'm just kidding, I'm going to talk about the main storytelling, but I am going to talk about Star Trek just a little bit because I love Star Trek. When I was a kid, I loved watching it. Lose my screen now?
Yes, your screen went away.
Mister, may I ask something? It's more geography related.
Okay, I'm back.
Is Egypt part of Africa?
Is it possible to disable certain people or throw them out?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, I guess our little friend, yeah. So anyways, for those of you who are not familiar with Star Trek, it is a movie series. It was pretty popular back in but at least the installment that I particularly love, the New Generation, was pretty popular during the 80s and then in the 90s when I watched it.
Okay.
The premise is pretty simple. Captain Picard and his crew of the Federation Starship Enterprise, they explore space, they go and seek out new life forms and civilizations, and as they say, they boldly go where no man has gone before, right? So you can see how this kind of sparked my imagination when I was a young mind growing up, right? So I love this series. Now, in one of the most iconic episodes of Star Trek, Captain Picard and his crew, they try to establish diplomatic relations and first contact with this alien race of the Tamarians. And they get into some problem when it comes to communicating with the Tamarians. Now, you may be wondering, well, what's so strange about that, right? I mean, what are the chances that some alien race in outer space is going to speak English? Well, oh my God, this is incredible. Yeah, turns out in Star Trek universe, everybody sort of speaks English because there's this little thing called universal translator, and the universal translator works as it's.
There's many features to be turned off, it would appear.
Maybe we can, yeah, let's give it a.
Is it possible to remove some people from the call?
Yes, absolutely it is.
Yeah, remove our little friend Jenna McLean, I guess.
No one cares. No one asks. No one. This meeting has no purpose. Bye.
Okay. Let's hope that's it. So yeah, sorry for the interruption. So let me continue. So yeah, anyways, usually the universal translator, you talk in your language, I talk in my language, and we both kind of understand each other, and it works with aliens also. So the problem here was not that the universal translator was broken or anything. It was working just fine. It was translating what the Tamarians were saying, but what they were saying didn't make much sense. So they kept saying things like Rai and Jiri at Lunga, or Timber his arms wide, or they would say things like Shaka when the walls fell. And this just didn't make much sense to the crew of Enterprise. They were baffled with this strange way of communicating that the Tamarians were using. Now, this miscommunication, it became potentially dangerous because later in the episode, Captain Picard and the Tamarian Captain Danton, they get trapped in this kind of containment field on this kind of desolate planet, which happens pretty often actually in Star Trek, this kind of containment field situation. And the problem was there was this kind of creature that was attacking them, and they couldn't understand each other because the Danton, the Tamarian captain, he kept saying things like Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra, and Captain Picard kept saying, no idea what.
Most recent to eject.
Who is making? Is that from you?
Can we remove?
Stop, Emma.
That was Emma.
That was Emma. So I guess now we should be. Okay.
If you remove her, I believe she'll be unable to return.
Okay, let's hope that was the last interruption. So back to our episode. Anyways, yeah, it was a potentially dangerous situation because they couldn't understand each other. Now, wouldn't you agree that as software developers, we are kind of often in this similar situation as the crew of enterprise? Because when we talk to the business people or the domain experts or the non-technical people, however you want to call them, right?
Mhm.
Oftentimes, even though we speak the same language, whether it's English or German or whatever, like we oftentimes we don't really understand the way they speak. The words they are using, they use some strange words that we don't understand, or even if they are using the words that we do understand, oftentimes it happens that the meaning that these words mean something different to them, right? And we find this out later when it's kind of too late, right? So there's this kind of bridge of misunderstanding between us, the developers, and them, like the rest of the world, let's say, right? Now, when it comes to the crew of enterprise, they are pretty smart. So usually midway through the episode, they figure things out. And they did so here. So what was happening is, to the Tamarians, imagery is everything. And this is how they communicate. They talk in allegories. They communicate by citing examples from the mythological history. And now that the crew of enterprise understood this, they still had one problem. This kind of presented another problem to them, because you see, imagine if Chancellor Troy would tell to you, Juliet on her balcony. You would probably have this image of romance in your head, right? But there is a problem with this way of communication. And the problem is, if you never heard about Shakespeare, you never read Romeo and Juliet, and you never heard about the famous scene in Romeo and Juliet where Romeo is, cruising through Verona, and then he sees Juliet on the balcony, and he's like, "Hey, Juliet," and she's like, "Oh, Romeo, why are you Romeo?" and all that stuff. If you never heard about it, then when you hear Chancellor Troy say Juliet on the balcony, you would not know what's the meaning she's trying to convey, right? You would think to yourself, well, there's this Juliet person, she's on the balcony, maybe she wants to jump from the balcony, right? So you see, the image that you will have in your head could be potentially really different than the one that Chancellor Troy was trying to convey to you. So what the crew of enterprise now needed to do is to learn the narrative from which the Tamarians were drawing this imagery, right? And if we go back to our software development analogy, we can say that they needed to learn the domain from which the Tamarians were drawing their images. Because if you don't know this domain, then the images, the allegories that they are using, they just don't make any sense to you. And for us as software developers, it is also crucial that we understand that we learn the domain for which we are building software that needs to support this domain. Because at the end of the day, as Alberto Brandolini said, it is our potential misunderstanding of the domain that will end up on production, not the expert knowledge. So we can have the best experts in the domain available, but if we as developers cannot kind of tap into that knowledge, transfer it from their heads to our heads and then to code, then our software is not going to support that domain pretty good, right? And it's not gonna be good software. So this is really, it's really important that we bridge this gap of misunderstanding. Now, I don't want to leave you with a cliffhanger. So again, in Star Trek, usually things turn out for the best. So they did so here. The crew of Enterprise, they did find a way to communicate with the Tamarians. And you see, at the end of the episode, they even got this kind of shared image, which is now called Picard and Danton at El Aldrel, which now symbolizes this kind of meeting of two different races who were not able to communicate, and then they bridged this gap and they were now able to communicate and work together, so that you can kind of say that now they have this shared image that both the crew of Enterprise can understand and the Tamarians. So it's kind of like the ubiquitous language when it comes to domain-driven design. So we humans, we are not like Tamarians in the fact that we are not limited to only speaking in allegories, right? But we do like stories. We've been telling stories, ever since we came to let's say to the stage of life on the earth. We've been telling stories ever since we lived in caves. We would tell stories, and then we would try to capture the meaning of these stories by printing them on the walls of our caves. And we still love telling stories to this day, right? So you can say that we are pretty much a storytelling animal. So when it comes to this old problem in software of bridging this gap of misunderstanding, why not use this tool that we are kind of evolutionary hardwired to, and which is just telling stories, right? And this is what domain storytelling is about. It is a collaborative technique that highlights how people work together, how they interact. And it's about getting people from different backgrounds and giving them the opportunity to learn from each other by telling stories and visualizing these stories. Now, as a technique, it originates from the University of Hamburg, I believe somewhere from the 90s. And these days it's made popular by these two fine young gentlemen called Stefan and Henning. They are both from Germany. And yeah, I personally went to Stefan's lecture and Henning's workshop. Both were great, so I would recommend you to check them out. And they also have a book on domain storytelling, which you can find on EPUB. And yeah, of course, I would obviously recommend it because I do love their workshop. So
Conrad, you have a question in the chat.
Okay, I cannot see the chat. Can we, I mean, I can, if you can read it to me, I can answer it now, or maybe we wait for the end of it.
So why you say domain, medicine, education, HR? Someone's asking for clarification on the word domain.
Okay, so domain is like, yeah, the area in which you are working for. Like, let's say you need to build a software for, I don't know, tracking COVID patients. Your domain is medicine, and more precisely, it's like epidemiology. I guess that's the word. Like, this is your domain. So the domain is like the area in which your software needs to work, in which somebody works. Like, if I'm a construction worker, my domain of knowledge is construction working, right? If somebody is a writer, his domain is writing. So that's, yeah.
So the terminology has the context of that domain.
Yes. Exactly. Okay, so back to our domain stories. They are told from the actor's perspective. So an actor in your domain can be a person, it can be a group of people, or it can be a computer system, right? And you probably don't want to draw these images like I did. Actually, I didn't draw them. I kind of took them from, they were like free resources I took, but it's easier and faster if you draw some icons that will represent these actors. Now, actors can create, work with, or exchange working objects. And working objects, again, they can be pretty much anything. They can be physical working objects and non-physical, like, for example, here we have a phone, or it can be like a chat, like a conversation, which is kind of like a non-physical thing when you talk with some people. And again, you're going to represent them with some nice icons. And icons are highly dependent on your domain, so you can have whatever suits your domain, those icons you're going to use. Now, when you have actors and you have working objects, they are connected with actions, and with actions you can form sentences. So this is how this works, right? So now we have two actors in this sentence, which is a bride and attendees, and they are connected with this action that is send. The action is send, and the work object is invitation. So we read this sentence as a bride sends invitation to attendees, right? So this is a sentence, and we annotate these sentences by giving them sequential numbers. Because later when we form stories, we're going to have multiple sentences. So we want to have this numbering to, like, sequential numbering to establish like what is the sequence of the story, right? What happens before what. Okay, so now that we know how to form sentences, we can form stories, because stories are just a bunch of sentences, right, in a certain order. So let's form our first domain story. Let's tell a story of this nice theater in Berlin called Babylon, which is if you take their word for it, they are the last cinema in the world that have their in-house orchestra, which is pretty nice if you are kind of a movie romantic. But bear in mind, if you go there, it is a German theater, so the subtitles will probably be in German, which can be problematic if you don't speak German, which I learned in a hard way. Yeah. Anyways, back to our theater. Let's say this nice girl called Marie, she owns this theater, and she has this friend who is called Hans, and Hans is a software developer. So one day they are strolling around Berlin, they are drinking their favorite beverage, and Marie says, well, you know what, Hans, you are a software developer. Can you make me a movie app? So he says, sure I can, I'm a software developer. So the next day, Hans comes with his laptop, right, his war equipment, and he starts asking some questions. So he says, okay, let's tackle the ticket sales first. This is kind of like the crucial part of this application we are trying to build. So let's tackle it first. So first thing that Hans wants to know, he wants to know who are the domain actors in this domain. So he says, who sells the tickets? So now Marie says, well, you know what? I have two working students, but sometimes I do it myself. It is a small cinema, you know, so sometimes I have to do multiple jobs and so on. So Hans says, okay, but no, let's keep it a bit abstract. How would you call the role you have when you are selling the ticket? The person who is selling the ticket, how would you call this person, this role he's performing, right? So Marie says a cashier. So now we have our first domain actor. So now Hans says, okay, now we have a domain actor. We call it a cashier, and I'm gonna draw an icon representing a cashier. So then he keeps on going with the questions, right? So now he says, well, okay, who buys the tickets? Because now he wants to know, how does Marie call the people who are buying the tickets? What is the term she uses in this domain, right? What is the terminology she uses in her domain of, movie selling tickets in the art cinemas? So she says, a moviegoer or one without a subscription. So now Hans draws a second domain actor, which is a moviegoer, and he also adds this annotation that says doesn't have a subscription, because obviously there is this special case that Marie kind of pointed where they do have a subscription, but for now Hans wants to keep the story going. He wants to learn the happy path, to understand what's happening overall in this story, and then he can come back and maybe draw another story for this special case. But for now, he just wants to get the happy path, so to say. So now Hans says, okay, what do you do as a moviegoer to buy the ticket? Because now he wants to know what is the action that is connecting the moviegoer and the cashier, the actors in this story, in this sentence. So Marie says, well, you tell the cashier which show you want to see and how many tickets you want, right? Okay, so now Hans has a first action, which is moviegoer tells the number of tickets for the show to the cashier, right? So now we have our first sentence, our first action in this domain. So now Hans, of course, says, well, okay, what happens then? Let's see the rest of the story. Marie says, well, usually the cashier suggests the best seat available. Okay, so now Hans senses there is something more involved here, right? There may be some other domain actor or some other working object. So Hans says, well, how do they do that, right? Let me hear some more about this. Marie says, well, you search for the available seats in the seating plan. So there's this work object called seating plan. So now Hans draws the rest of this sentence, which is a cashier gets the show's seating plan, and then they search for available seats in the seating plan. So we have some more working objects here. And this conversation can go on, I mean, not forever, but it will go on for some time. And then finally, Hans and Marie will come up with this, with a full story, which will look something like this, right? It looks a bit complicated, but we can easily follow it because it is annotated, so we can see what happens after what. Now, there are a few things to note when it comes to domain stories. So notice here that, I'm sorry for some technical problems. Yeah, actors in your stories, they only appear once. So you draw the icons for the actors only once. Working objects, on the other hand, you draw them once per activity. And this is because, first of all, it would be really impractical if you would draw them only once, because the picture will become really messy really fast. Other reason is because your working objects, they can change their representation in different actions, right? So a seating plan can be like a physical paper with a seating plan, or it could be like a seating plan in your computer, which is like a digital non-physical object. So you may use a different icon when you are representing the seating plan in different contexts, right? So this is why you draw it once per activity. Another thing is that we already kind of mentioned is there are no conditionals, right? Because when Marie said that there's this special case when the user doesn't have a subscription, Hans didn't draw some kind of conditional, and then you have one story here, one story there, like diverging stories. No, he just added an annotation. But when you are drawing your story, you don't want to have conditionals. You just want the happy path or the 80% path, right? You want to have what happens here, the overall picture. And then if this case of a user having a subscription, if this is a special case, then you can go back and draw another story for this case, right? But you don't want conditionals in your domain stories. And another thing is these domain stories, they can be different in scope, right? So here we only this is like the low level story of ticket sales, like the box office, and here we see the whole story is only represented with one action, right? The box office is only one action, buys the tickets from the cashier. And of course, so you can have these overview big stories, and then you can have stories that are lower in scope or more close to the work. Okay, so domain storytelling, it is a modeling technique, but it is also a workshop, right? So what do you need to have a successful domain storytelling workshop? Well, you want to have the right people, and this can be much harder than it sounds. So you probably want a diverse set of people that are coming from different areas of the company, right? So let's say Marie's little movie theater, it kind of blows off and it becomes really successful. So now Marie doesn't have time to, and she doesn't need to like do the cashier work. She's just doing like the management stuff. So now if you ask Marie, like how is selling tickets, how the ticket sales is going, she will tell you the story of how it used to be or the story of how it should be, right? But if you want to know how it is today, you want to go to that working student, you want to go to the person who is really doing the job, right? So when you are doing a domain storytelling workshop, you want to have those people from different parts of the company, but you want to have the people who are really doing the job and who really know firsthand how the situation actually is, not how it should be or how they want it to be and so on. So have the right people. Of course, as you saw in our little example, you want to keep the story going, right? So you have to be active with the questions, ask people what happens next and so on. You want to keep the story going, keep the people engaged. You also want to use something that is called active listening. So you constantly retell the story, especially as you're drawing it on the whiteboard. You are retelling the story because by retelling the story or summarizing what people said, you can also check if you if you understood well what they are saying. And they can say, okay, yeah, that's right, that's what happens. Or they will say, no, you got me wrong. Let me tell you again how this happens. So you need to retell the story all the time, which is called active listening, right? And if you're doing a physical workshop, you kind of are limited with the number of people you can fit in one room and they still can all see the story, right? Because if the domain story is not visible to everything, then you kind of lose the whole point of it. So it does have to be visible to all, but you probably have enough space to put all the people you need. And finally, once you are done, you want to document it. Maybe you want to take a picture and then you maybe want to, I don't know, print it out and put it on your wall in your company, or maybe put it into some digital form so everybody can access it, especially if you are working remotely. But you do want to document it and store it somewhere, because what's the point if you don't? Okay, now we know how to perform a workshop. So the last thing is to tackle is, what about modeling tools? Well, the first and the simplest solution is just use a whiteboard and some sticky notes, right? You use markers, you draw everything by hand. One thing you can do is something that Henning and Stefan, they recommend is you print out the icons. So the whole thing looks a bit less messy, right? Because if you are drawing everything, not everybody is really good in drawing. Like me, for example, I have a horrible handwriting and I have no idea how to draw. So it could be potentially ugly. So maybe you can help yourself by kind of printing out these icons and then creating your little DIY domain storytelling kit. Of course, you can go for some digital solutions, some digital blackboard or some projector, or like a big kind of like a big iPad or whatever, where you can draw anything and again draw the domain story yourself. Or you can also use this tool that Henning and Stefan made, and it's called Domain Story Modeler, I guess. You can kind of see the URL here also. And it's a digital tool, so it can be good also, for example, if you are doing a remote workshop. But also, let's say if you are doing it in person, you can maybe project it to a big screen and then just use this tool to draw your story. So this is it. And before I leave, let me leave you with the wise words of Captain Zsolnok Pihar, who said, "Communication is a matter of patience and imagination." So thank you all, and if you have any questions, I'll be I guess we have time, so I can answer it. And thanks Oliver for having me, and all of you who joined.
Thank you for the presentation. I think you did a really nice job with it. I'm really interested in what happens next in your experience to translate the outcomes that have been described thus far into something that a programmer can actually act on.
But from my experience, it is like the next step would be to write like the ideal scenario for me is like from these domain stories, you can kind of write your use cases, however you want to call them, in like something like Behat, maybe for like where you have like higher level automated tests and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I mean, for me, the good thing about these domain stories, they're really close to, like, if you look at it, they're really close to something that when you as a developer you think, okay, this happens with this happens with this. It's like kind of, to me, it's close to be like easy, like it's close to code in a way that it's not like abstract where you, and this is like the whole thing about these main stories. It's like, and it's, to me, it's similar to something that is called the specification by example, which is there's like a book from,
Gojo Adzik.
yeah, yeah. So it's really like, it's kind of like giving you concrete examples, and this is like more concrete than some abstract when somebody comes and you do this and that, and it really feels like you have no idea how to put it in code because code is very concrete. And this is like kind of a step
Right.
towards kind of concrete thing that you can. But yeah, in my example, I have something like from this you will get to some specification by example, like stuff like, and then you.
So you mentioned BHAT, which is one example for,
Yeah,
in this case, probably Python, I think, of a Cucumber implementation,
yeah,
which is where that given when then stuff comes from.
yeah.
The
Behat
initial start out condition, the trigger condition, and the result that should be observable.
Yeah, Behat is like a PHP version of Cucumber, like it's.
PHP versus Python. Yeah, so there's implementations of Cucumber in many different languages.
I didn't mention, but I'm a PHP developer. Don't hold that against me.
Right.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I think using something related to event storming, you'll be able to also go through similar steps where you'll be able to identify your actors and happy path. So, for instance, if someone is new to DDD and they are trying to get their requirements right, which one would you, let's say, recommend for the person for them to be able to get their requirements right?
Yeah. So yeah, I actually I was like on when I was on that workshop from Henning, he also got this question. So yeah, and I agree with him. So I kind of say what he said as a creator of the creator storytelling. Yeah, use like the difference between domain storytelling and event storming, and actually like in the book about domain storytelling, they also quote and talk about event storming. Event storming is more about kind of like focusing on the events in your system, like kind of all the events that can happen. While domain storytelling is more about these actors and how they interact together, right? So I would even say like you, again, like it is a kind of a cop out if I say you use whatever fits you. But if you have some place where you really need to focus on how people and systems are interacting together, then you can use domain storytelling. Or if you want to focus on like events that happen in your system, then you use event storming. But I would say, because like, again, the whole idea about domain driven design is that your domain kind of reflects in your code. And I would say that not only that, but dependent on your domain, you may want to use different workshops to like explore this domain. So domain storytelling, event storming, they are now even some, I saw like hybrid domain, like I think that there are more and more workshops now, and probably there will be even more and more workshops because the domains that we are working with are highly different, right? So and it would be weird that you can only use one workshop and apply it in every domain, right? Because that would kind of mean that would be like a paradox if domain-driven design means that your computer's software is going to be different in different domains, like the core of your software. So I would say, yeah, you kind of use whatever each one of these two workshops is suited better for the maybe specific case you have, or maybe use a third one because I think that they are kind of popular now. When I look at design conferences, I often see like new types of workshops. But yeah, I see not like if you're a beginner, like yeah, just pick one and try to use it and learn it. And then once you learn the one, you see, oh, this second one maybe is. You will notice what's the difference, and then you will know when you want to use this one or this one. But yeah, I would say from my experience, they are pretty like similar, easy to learn. Both of them are like easy to learn and.
Thank you.
So I have a question, and I have an ulterior motive. I'll be perfectly transparent about it. I run a couple of workshops every month that are full-day workshops. The timing of them is set up so that anyone in any of the Americas, from Canada down to the tip of South America, and most of Europe can take advantage of them. I start them at 11 o'clock Eastern time in the US. And so that will be, I think it's 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock p.m. in EU, which includes most of Africa, the same time zone. And in the chat right now, I believe, is a link to my Eventbrite that has all of my events. And there are 2 of them coming up in February, 3 events altogether in February. But 2 of those are ones that happen every single month. And one of the things that we almost always get requests for is, let's do some behavior-driven development. Let's do some cucumber or whatever its particular name is for a given language. It's called, what is it, spec flow for C#, C++ or C#. And it's got different names and different platforms. But this is what I love doing. And I tell a story about a scenario where you're gathering your requirements, and what you've described with DDD is probably an even more solid actors and objects kind of model, where objects are great, but they just sit there and look at you until someone acts on them. And then, oh, that's where the methods come from. It has to do that. So this is the kinds of thing that we do every single month on the second Saturday and the second Sunday of every month. We do it for an entire day. From my point of view, I start at 11 o'clock and we don't finish until 7 o'clock. So you are welcome to join us at any point. I would very much enjoy that, because I am working really hard to take the audiences that I typically get now, which are on 3 continents, and make that 5 continents. I'm pushing down into South America. I'm pushing into Africa. Every once in a while, I'll get someone from Africa, not very often. So it's usually the US, sometimes Canada, all over Europe, sometimes India, which sounds kind of crazy. I have a couple of regulars who will join me from India, and they'll take a day off on Monday so that they can stay up until late into the night and stay with us till like 2 in the morning for them. So I just wanted to put that out there for anyone who has an interest. They're always free. There's no sales other than opinions being sold, like TDD is the greatest thing, mob programming, wonderful, all that kind of stuff, right? But no one's going to sell you anything.
Opinionated opinions.
So
Thank you, Bob.
thank you.
Anyone has any question related to domain storytelling?
Could we try translating some of what you have described into things that would exist in the code domain, whether it's object-oriented or whatever? I think, when I think of code, I'm listening for nouns and for verbs.
Yeah.
The nouns are things, which are represented as classes or objects. And I'm listening for verbs, which translate into methods or functions, depending on your language.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do this with mental exercise. I will say that I'm doing this on the fly now. Yeah, I would say like probably the actors will be like objects, like PCs, objects with players and stuff. Actions will be obviously behaviors, and working objects will probably be like like a value object probably. Like for example, that kind of what was it, seating plan? That sounds like something that could be a value object. It's not like an entity. It doesn't have like a life cycle. It's like you create it by a value object.
So most objects have both data and behaviors. And the behaviors work really hard at keeping their internal representation of the data invisible. You have to act on them with specific, what is it you're trying to do? I'm not going to just give you the data. You're trying to buy a ticket? Okay, good. Here's a buy method. And then what you get is something that represents that you have a ticket, and the state of the ticket is sold, and it maybe has your name associated with it and things like that.
Yeah. Ticket would like, for example, maybe be a value object, which is like something you like, kind of reminds me of like the classic money example where money is like it's like an example for like the value object, like, but yeah,
Mhm.
let's say, yeah, that's something like there. Yeah, actors would probably be your objects. Behaviors like their external, like the external interface are like those actions, like you can call like we go buy tickets, but this method is like public in a way you can call it, but internals are of course encapsulated. You don't know what happens inside. And yeah, tickets and stuff like that would probably be some value objects, or yeah, working objects I would say are probably value objects or entities. If it's like if there's a case for them to really be entities, they have like identity and
So
it's important.
the most typical and most universal object in any system that's online is a user. And maybe there's different variations of users. There's administrative users, there's people that are buying, there are people that are managing the sales or the popcorn stand or whatever. And they have certain responsibilities for certain actions that can be taken against them. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that DDD gets at is, okay, what do those people do? What do they do it to?
Yeah, and probably like there's like that joke that only drug dealers and software developers have users, because usually just naming, because like here it's not a user, it's a moviegoer. Like
Yeah, it's an unfortunate generalization. Well,
we
what do you
like
mean? What word do you use to describe your user?
90%
Well,
of our application we have this thing called user, and yeah, usually the user has a different, it could be a cook or a client or something, but it's not a user. Like you,
Yeah.
you never hear, you rarely, yeah, only drug dealers say I have my users. I never heard it. Like somebody who's selling cars to say, oh, I'm selling cars to my users. Like they sell cars to, I don't know, clients or
yeah, it's
whatever.
an unfortunate generalization.
Yeah.
But that actually gets at an important point. The one phrase I didn't hear you use was the one that's really key from my mindset when I'm listening to a user is domain specific language.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
mean,
if the programmer who has the role or the responsibility of delivering the solution and the person who is the subject matter expert and has the language is the person who wants the solution, when they get together, they better be talking the same language.
yeah,
Because if the developer does a great job of delivering the wrong thing, it's a waste of everybody's time.
yeah, yeah, my bad. I didn't kind of explicitly, but like the whole idea about domain storytelling, like these workshops, like event storytelling, is to get to that point of the ubiquitous language, the notion of where we like have the shared language and we both know. If I say like Juliet on her balcony, we both know, okay, this is the image of romance and not somebody who wants to commit suicide or whatever. And yeah, this workshop is like a way of getting there, like having the shared understanding. And then when we see this like domain story, that's why you retell it again, and when everybody in the room is like, yeah, this is what happens, and the developers also understand because they also the same picture. Now we have like we have this shared vocabulary, and what is more important is like when we are using the shared vocabulary, we know what it means. When we say a moviegoer, I think of the same thing as you think. Not like I think of one thing and the clients, they think of something else. So yeah, that's like the end result of this workshop is to get to the point where we have this shared understanding and like a shared vocabulary with both.
Right.
To like we are like both aligned on it, let's say.
Exactly. Because what a terrible waste it would be if you spent all that time, worked all that on delivering a fantastic chunk of code, well tested, and it's the wrong thing.
Yeah.
That's not what I wanted at all.
Unfortunately, I think it happens way too often.
Yeah.
Which is why, like for me, the original, like the way I see the main idea of the major design is like to bridge this gap of misunderstanding and actually build, like the idea to build the right thing by understanding what you need to build, which is like it's like a really logical thing, but it's incredible how often I've seen people just like procedure skipping this step of like understanding what we need to build and just focusing on building it before we even understand what it is. Like, and like constantly like not investing time to understand what exactly we need to develop. Deliver the wrong thing, and then it's like, oh, these clients, they don't know what they want. But yeah. Long story.
Excellent. Thank you, Dawood.
Anyone? Any question? Or there's no other question? Okay. So I think at the moment there is no other question that we want to ask. I think we just use some of the few time we have just to know ourselves before we leave here. We are just 10 people, right? So getting to know each other will be very good. Then we say bye-bye to each other, then we meet for the next event. Yes. So maybe who is starting? Should I mention names? Okay, so my name is Oliver, and my full name is Oliver Mensah. I'm in Ghana. I currently work remotely for Future 500. Outside work, I love organizing developer programs like meetups, related stuff. Yeah. So that's a bit about me. Who's going next?
Yeah, I'll go next.
Okay.
I'm Bob Allen. As you can see, because I use the rename feature, one of the nicer parts of Zoom. I'm in Michigan in the USA. That's in Eastern Standard Time. And I professionally coach development teams to be able to do what it is they have to do in ways that make them happy, bring them joy, and allow them to feel confident that they know exactly what it is that they've done. And that allows them to sleep well at night, which makes me happy.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah. Who's next?
I can go next. My name is Ibrahim Abdallah. I'm from Ghana, but currently based in Vancouver in Canada. I'm a software engineer at Microsoft at the moment. Yeah.
I can continue. I'm Simon. I'm from Germany, and some of you I know from Twitter. So yeah, I'm also doing software development, and I'm currently reading the DDD book from
Awesome.
Eric Evans. So I was pretty interested.
I go next. So I'm Sheriff. I'm developer from Algeria. Algeria is North Africa, in case someone doesn't know it. I'm co-founder and co-organizer of DD Africa with my brother Oliver, and we are happy to have you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for helping put this together.
Thank you.
Hello, I go next. So first, I had to thank. Sorry, I can remember your name. So thank you for your presentation. It's the first time I hear about the domain story. So thank you very much. My name is Amin Seri. I'm from Algeria. I'm software developer, and I'm really interested about DDD and software architecture in general. So thank you.
Anybody else? I think we have to.
So I'm curious to know a little bit about Dawood.
Yeah, Dawood. I think Dawood like wrote in chat, so I don't know. Maybe his mic is.
Oh no. Okay. Here we are. Very good. In Ghana?
Yeah.
Ah, all right. Thank you, Dawood. very much. I look forward to meeting you. Dawood is a man of action. He already signed up.
Sadiq.
Mike. Okay, and you already kind of met me. Yeah, my name is Zvonimir, but yeah, it's a tough name for, yeah, I know. For if you're not Croatian or Serbian, which is like most of the world. So yeah, it's tough. Yeah, and yeah, I'm also I work as a software developer. I work I'm mostly in PHP. Also, yeah, I'm interested in like architecture and stuff like that. So kind of led me to engineering design and everything. And yeah, my Twitter handle, I showed it. It's Conrad-126. So yeah, you can check. I occasionally write some blog posts and yeah, talks like this. And yeah, thanks again to Oliver and Sharif, yeah, for having me.
Thank
And
you.
nice meeting you all.
So I have a confession to make about PHP.
Yeah.
The last time I had anything to do with PHP, it was good for exactly one thing. And
Right.
that was the basis or the language underlying at least two very largely adopted content management systems, Drupal and another one.
WordPress.
And this is before it went object oriented.
Oh,
Yeah, it's a very different language than back in the days.
Evidently, I learned that recently.
I kind of when it was like already starting to get so I all the stories were like it didn't have even like key like those you couldn't like declare stuff like public like access modifiers like I joined it when it did have it. But yeah, nowadays it's pretty I would say like it's kind of it's beginning to be similar in Java with some features like you can actually write almost statically typed code because PHP still is not statically typed language, but you can declare, you can now even declare your properties like the type of your properties. So it's getting, and it's kind of like, I would say it's kind of getting maybe the best of both worlds. Like it's still like an interpretive language and fast. Like, yeah, it has its good sides and bad sides, but bad stuff, I guess. But yeah, I'm not that well, I would call myself an expert on like comparing different languages, but yeah, but definitely it is pretty different than like, I don't know, 10 years before. So the whole bad rap it has, I think it's at least, yeah, it's kind of, people should give it another chance, at least. Oh, you're muted, Bob.
Thank you for that. Has anyone played around with Kotlin?
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
I like it is flexible compared to Java and less verbose.
The reason I ask is because I actually know some really die-hard Java developers that are very, very skilled and accomplished that have sworn off of Java in favor of Kotlin.
Yeah.
For pretty much the reason that you just identified. It's much more eloquent. You can express yourself much more clearly.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Which I thought was, for these guys, quite a testament.
So I did a lot of PHP in my career, and the first thing I was surprised in Kotlin is to have invocable or callable classes like in PHP, which are in Kotlin. So in PHP we have double underscore invoke, and in Kotlin you can have just invoke method in a class, and this class will be invocable like a function. And I started investigating in Kotlin, and I found that it is really easy to learn for someone who come from another language or other object-oriented language, and it will be up and running in 1 day or two to make little things, not as an experimenting developer or something else, but it is really cool. I like it.
So exploring languages that are new to whoever shows up is one of the things we do at least once a year, something called, it's a Plubla Party, which is an absurdly long acronym for programming language I've been meaning to try and haven't gotten around to yet. Plibla Pamati. And the whole idea is whoever shows up comes in knowing that I want to try some language I know I don't know much about, but I'm really curious about it. And so we try to put together people that have an interest in the same language. And then everyone gets to explore that together. And there's no embarrassment because everyone came with the starting declaration that it's a given. I don't know this language. We're going to explore it together. And that makes for a fun session.
Awesome. So I think we've come to the end of the program. It's 8:04 here, and we plan to spend just an hour for this meetup. So I'd like to say thanks to everyone who joined us to make this happen. We plan to host a lot of programs related to DDD stuff, and we hope that we learn more and become very, very expert in adopting the best some of the best practices and approaches to development. So thank you for joining us today. And also, thanks for joining us as a speaker, and we really appreciate the presentation, sharing the good knowledge with us.
Thanks everyone who tuned in to listen to me, and yeah, see you next time.
You've
So the
trained your
next thing
fingers.
is I'm going to edit the video and upload the right content there. Yeah, and sorry for all this bad bombing stuff.
It happens.
Yeah,
So thank you, everyone.
sure.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Sure,
Bye-bye.
Salman. Happy to see you.
I